sports are really important vehicles for relationships.
We have purpose. We have a why. We bring people together. We connect.
I feel like God is our greatest supporter and our greatest coach.
From Los Angeles at Sinai Temple, this is Rabbi on the Sidelines. This week we are joined by longtime Detroit Pistons physical therapist and strength and conditioning coach, and now I just heard professional climber. We'll hear a little bit more about that later. Arnie Kander, now found in Boulder, Colorado. Arnie, it's so good to have you. Good morning.
Thank you, Rabbi. Very amateur on the climber.
Amateur on the climber, but I guess step by step, they say.
You got to start somewhere, right? You got to start
exactly.
Somewhere. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you so much. So this is a podcast that speaks about sports and faith. Mm-hmm. I know within your world of physical conditioning, and I've gotten to do some research about what you've done to literally build championship players and teams, that it's not just about doing physical exercises, but there is a faith component to get these players, and as you were telling me off the air just before, the teams link together. So in your job, first of all, tell us how you got into this business of physical conditioning and strength, literally to the top, to the NBA. What was that journey?
Well, it starts way back. I played basketball through elementary school, junior high, high school, loved the game, had a knee injury in high school that actually forced me to go to physical therapy. I was the guy asking all the questions. I probably drove my therapist crazy because I always brought it back to basketball. Like, how does this affect this? How does this affect my movement? If I'm doing a crossover step back, will these exercises help? And I didn't really get the answers I wanted to hear. So I researched a little bit more and actually went a slightly different route. I was reading at the time about Willie Gault. He was a wide receiver for the Chicago Bears, probably the fastest man in the world. And he had studied ballet or classical dance with Chicago Lyrical Ballet. Now, this is before you could look things up. You had to actually read it and go to the library. So I read about him, and I was very fascinated, very interested about his claim to fame in dance beyond just loving the movement was he improved his vertical by 4 inches. And for one of the top sprinters in the world, that's a very significant science. That's a very significant metric to see. So I'm like, wow, let me try this out. And I was awful, absolutely awful. So I took some local dance classes, realized it's about rhythm, it's about technique, it's really about human performance, it's about biomechanics, it's about form. The amazing thing was my knee wasn't much better from my physical therapy, but when I started studying classical dance, my knee got better because I worked on alignment, I worked on technique, I worked on flexibility. This would now be called maybe a little more Pilates, yoga, not to lump it together, but it's really learning more about your body.
One of the most forgotten aspects for me when I watch a person go out for a run, get on a bike, use an elliptical, is the preparation, the pre-process that the body is used to get it ready, to amplify it. So I'm going to take you through a series of movements that prep you for a run, enhance the run, and help the recovery. So simple movements. What we start off first is an easy march in place. Now, why a march? The march is going to control the spine, meaning that I'm not flexing the spine, I'm not arching the spine, but also what I'm doing is lining my thigh up, hinging my knee, loosening the body up, preparing it for the stepping process. So I'll do a set of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. Second phase, I hold my posture and I release my legs behind the body. Why? I want to release my kneecaps, unlock the beginning of my hips, open up my posture, and keep my thighs side by side when I do the movement. Series of 10. Next movement, get the hips ready for impact. We cross through the body, square up the chest, make sure it's a square foot plant, body's under control. Same thing, series of 10. All right, now we get into the lower legs. It's called a touch release. Notice the hips are square. The toe is touching across the body. I'm warming up one of the most vulnerable areas of a runner, the IT band, side of the knee. 10 again, and then the last phase of cross movement, release behind the body. What most runners, what most athletes, what most people that exercise are going to want to do is spiral the hips. Don't let it happen. You're actually warming up the core to move the hips and activate.
So we just saw this video. Talks about preparation and simple exercises that when I watch that video, it's, you know what, I can do that myself, but I don't. So what is it about preparation of the body that gets somebody in the right frame of mind to a championship level?
So yeah, great question. And I think the video kind of gives a look at everything begins from ground up. And that's not just body, that's physiology, that's brain function. And so when we start doing things too quickly, we usually don't actually master the movement. So I looked at basically simple components of movement in the game of basketball. We have to be able to get low. We have to be able to twist. We have to be able to cross. We have to be able to stay long. And then finding that if you go to more complex movements, not just with athletes, with anybody, usually they do them incorrectly. So they become really good at being bad. And for me, it's the opposite. Become really, really good at being good with all technique. And that's fundamental stuff that we do from just getting low. So I would measure everything from how low does a guy get in his shot? How low is he in his stance? You know, type of ankle flexibility, hip flexibility that's required. And if you watch a warm-up in the NBA, if you have, you know, the good fortune to be able to watch one, just throwing this out, and I've probably done 10,000 warm-ups, probably 80% of people do it incorrectly. They don't really participate. They kind of do their own thing. They do a modified version. When you do something simple and you coach it, literally, I don't care if it's an NBA player, the owner of the team, whoever, you bring their name into the room and you correct it in a nice way, in a complimentary way, but making sure you're coaching. It's not just, oh, they're NBA guys are getting loose or getting warm. Every coach, maybe this is not always a great thing, I've been with a lot of coaches, is I start off my first conversation, when we start practice, it's when we step on the court. It's not when you do your first drill, it's when we step on the court. So part of this warm-up is a mental aspect of getting prepared for this day. If you just do it haphazard, people aren't paying attention, but then somehow we expect the light to turn on when practice begins, never works. So I find out from the coach, what is your first drill you anticipate doing? I will prepare them. So my last drill will match your first drill. So we're making sure that we're having this nice synergy between me and the coach and everything matches. Throughout that whole process, it's literally a machine, a team. When we march in that pattern, you'll hear a pattern of up, up, down, down, up, up, down, down. When we do things faster, you'll hear the pattern of it. So everything has purpose, everything has reason. And like you said, wow, I can do that, which is, again, I think we get kind of, you know, in this quandary with athletes. We want to make everything so hard and difficult and complicated because they're so incredibly, you know, gifted. But you have to start simple.
So take us to one or two players that you can think of over your time, either with the Pistons or within the NBA, that perhaps did things incorrectly and then over time took it to a championship level that you saw that improvement and made a difference on the court.
Yeah, so, I mean, usually the ones that won championships did it correctly. There's a reason why you win championships. You know, it's focus, it's discipline, it's ability to be coached all the time, not just when the head coach speaks, but the assistant coaches, the strength coaches, anybody who's speaking to them. There's that oxytocin, eye contact, that respect that goes back and forth. You don't just turn that light on when the game starts. So a great story. Now, he hasn't won a championship, but he's one of my favorite people. He's kind of like an adopted son, is Karl Towns, right, who's in the NBA with the Minnesota Timberwolves. So my last season, I retired from Detroit. I was, you know, a lot of travel, years and years of doing it. And Flip Saunders, God rest his soul, you know, said, I need you to come to Minnesota for 1 year. I want you to come here, you know, and just be part of what we're doing, you know, add whatever you can add. So I went. What a gift. Tayshaun Prince was there, one of my dear friends. Kevin Garnett, his last season, and we drafted Karl Towns. Great kid, unbelievable talent, one of the top players in the league. We wouldn't start practice until Karl would match my rhythm. So Karl was out, you know, he could run fast, he could jump high, he could shoot the three, he could post up, he could do it all. But I wanted his focus and his discipline to be there every single moment. So
we would sit there and I would begin with this very simple, let's get into a defensive stance because you're going to win a championship based on defense, not offense. Well, maybe the league's changed a little bit now, but defense is the key. So we would start in this really good wide stance, hands out wide. And I said, we won't begin the second movement until we all master the first movement. So we're in this stance. Usually it should be 4 or 5 seconds, and then you go right to the next movement. And Carl might be a little distracted. He might be talking to somebody. He might not do it the way I want. So I'd be Carl, 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 Carl. And then eventually Kevin Garnett would say, Carl, pay attention to Arnie. Maybe in different words than what I just said. But the key is he was the number 1 pick in the draft. He will be on championship teams, will be.
For a second.
But it's coaching. It's making sure that the discipline is there every single day. You don't skip steps. And from that day on, he's been amazing. I do predict he'll win a couple championships in the league. He would be one. And then, like I said, most people that have been part of championship teams, you don't really have to. They understand this. This is just maybe an occasional reminder when you're super fatigued and tired, but not 2 reminders. Usually it's 1.
So how did those Pistons teams come together? Isaiah Thomas, Dennis Rodman, Joe Dumars, under the leadership of Bill Davidson, which we'll talk about Mr. Davidson in just a moment. But what was that like, taking those personalities and having them listen to you, who didn't play in the NBA, but are teaching people the simple things of how to do them good?
Right. So those teams I was secondary on because I was brought on separately, privately. So it wasn't like an official, then starting in 90, 91. So my challenge was actually, I think, a little bit harder because now I'm coming in official after championships, knowing the players, being part of some rehab and, whatever. We talked about performance. Back then, performance was kind of like a voodoo world. Like what is performance? Like performance is just get on the court and then maybe you get some ice and anti-inflammatories. And when I was talking about alignment and vestibular orientations and balance and reactions and center of gravity, it was like, wait, what is that? And then bringing in the nutrition and understanding the science of that, again, this was not really talked about much. But when you take players that have been part of championships, and now you're starting to get the typical LA Lakers have their drop, the Celtics have their drop, the Pistons have their drop. That's when it's a little harder to capture, but it's also in ways easier because you don't want to stay down for long. You want to be able to come back. And so NBA players, athletes in general, they know right away if what you're saying has merit and if they're interested in hearing what you're saying and learning more about it. So you have to have background, you have to have understanding. As you said in the beginning, it's all about relationship. It's about hearing them. My first question always is, tell me what's made you great. Isaiah, what's made you great? Bill Lambier, what's made you great? Bill wasn't always so pleasant in his responses, but still, the question is there. The relationship.
So what were their answers? What is Isaiah Thomas' answer of what made him great?
Well, that's a great question. It's very similar. Most have discipline. Most have routine. And what I mean by that is routine from the moment you wake up. Not obsessive compulsive routine, but a routine that makes sense. So I wake up, I have a cup of coffee, I have a glass of water, my breakfast is similar, I go for a walk, I do a little meditation, whatever it may be, they all have routine. And they're consistent with that routine. What I found with great athletes that haven't achieved that same level of success, you'll ask them, what is your routine? And they'll be like, well, the trainer tells me what to do, or the strength coach tells me what to do, or the therapist I go to, they tell me what's up. They tell me, what I should be doing in life. I'm like, great, you've got really good people working with you. What is your routine? And I come back to that again and say, until you really establish a routine that is yours, not other people, because that's their routine. That's not yours. You'll learn from others. You get your toolbox, you put things in there, and you find what works. And if it doesn't work, you make an adjustment. So that's been a consistent theme, whether I'm working with high school kids, great college athletes, just again saying, hey, you might not know it now, but gather, listen, pay attention. Anytime you've been around somebody with a little experience, sit down with them, go out to lunch, say, hey, can I nudge you here a little bit? Can I get a little bit of information because I want to get a really big toolbox?
Is there any time where what makes somebody great was actually failure or challenges.
Yeah, that's so true. Sometimes it works against somebody. So I had a player, and I won't put the name out, but he was always hurt, chronically hurt. So he came to the Pistons, and I think part of it was hopefully I was going to be able to work some magic or whatever. And I said, there's no magic. It's, again, really sitting down and digging deep into it. So one of my first questions, again, was the routine. And he started listing like 15 or 16 modalities of things he does to his body. And they're all great stuff, acupuncture, dry needling. He was doing myofascial release. He was doing strain, counter strain. I mean, all things I know and things that, that I'm part of. But I'm like, that's a lot. Like, how do you even know? Let's just make this a little science project. How do you know what works and what doesn't work? When you have that many things that are really hitting your body, hitting your mind, hitting your spirit, how do you know what works and doesn't? I'm going to give you 2 to 3. You look at all of those, let's talk in 3 or 4 days, and you break it down to 2 or 3 that you really think are important, and then we'll talk about it. We'll have a conversation about it. He ended up getting down to 1, and we ended up using 1 modality. Then we adopted some of my thoughts and principles about routine, coming in the building, having a system. Where do you go to work on your ankles? Where do you go to work on your hips? But now, it doesn't mean I can't do manual therapy. But again, what do you do? Because in the game, if something tightens up, we don't have a lot of time to go back to the training room and me to go through manual therapy on you again. You have to have remedies and systems that we see it in the playoffs right now, right? A guy goes down. Yeah, they come over and check on him, and barring, hopefully, God forbid, not an injury. What do you do to get yourself back in that game? So the more a person relies upon the outside, not that some of that's not necessary, I'm not saying that, but what do you do for yourself? Because you're going to face challenges, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. And how do you adapt? How do you get through that? And that's part of this process.
No, and I think that's not just a on the basketball court thing, but like we tell every bar mitzvah student, right? They say, what happens if I mess up for my Torah reading, right? We're going to learn to get through that so that it's not an end of game situation as well.
100%.
So you've had a seat literally courtside for 25 years. And before the show, you said that you had an angle that you looked at. What were you looking at besides the just amazing entertainment factor of these unbelievable world-class athletes? What are you watching in a game, even when you're sitting in your house watching the NBA playoffs right now? So that, can you, for instance, see like, you know what, that person didn't take care of himself, not the physical part, but you just said the mental, spiritual piece. Or like, AD goes for 5 minutes, right? Was that when you're watching a game, even to this day on TV, right? What are you looking at? So you said, you know what, that guy's going to get through it, and he's going to get to the end.
Yeah. So obviously a big advantage. I'm at every practice. I'm at every shoot around. I'm on every bus ride. I'm in the hotel working on athletes. So what the game plan is. You know what Coach Larry Brown is expecting from a timeout. I'm in a lot of the timeouts because I'll go in and work on a calf real quickly. Or hey, Arnie, my back, and I'm quickly go through and do a little soft tissue, not to interfere with Coach Brown by any means. But you're always involved. The reason for the angle on the court was I didn't have to look over 7-foot bodies behind the bench. So I had direct access to what was going on the court. But more importantly, and I mentioned to you before we got on the podcast, I had their eyes when they came back to the bench. So I could look at them and quickly, a quick thumbs up, we're good, a nod. And if anything was there, I didn't have to crawl around the bench and then start the conversation. So sometimes it would just be the oxytocin, right? The eyes, just the connection. Okay, we're good. Or it might be I go over and do a real quick. Again, we don't learn this in PT school, right? We don't learn about 5-second evaluations. So it's a real quick assessment. You know the player, you know them, you know their body. You're watching for movement patterns. You're watching for limitations. You know game speed. You know the cuts. You know the sharpness. You know center of gravities. When you start to see those not being what you want, your eyes are a little more attentive to making sure. It could be many things, right? This could be lack of sleep. It could be maybe they got into an argument with their wife the night before. Maybe their kid's dealing with something. They could be fighting off a cold. I mean, there's so many components that never reach the media that we wonder why a player is just not up to par. We come back always usually to the physicality and just say, oh, he doesn't look right. But knowing this guy might not have slept last night. He might have had food poisoning. He might have, again, the emotional aspect. Maybe he's dealing with family things. I mean, there's so much to this. And you, Rabbi, know that story you just mentioned about the bar mitzvah boy. Like, it's the bar mitzvah, but it's the 3 to 4 years of preparation with you that really is what it's about, right? It's about the process. And you know what? We're human. So if you go up there and you mess up your mafter a little bit and your haftor a little bit, you know what? You're a human being. That's wonderful. And you know what? You've now entered life as a human. So no different in my line of work, right? We look at every athlete as these, Superman, Batman, whatever, Robin. And at the end of the day, they're human beings. They have families. They have, things going on. They're dealing with the contract. They're dealing with the media. It's one of the few things when you think about it. Could you imagine in life, you do something that, whatever, it's not so great, and then there's a microphone asking you about it, like right after the game. Right. And I watched some of the game last night. There's a little controversy on that. Do you have to say something? Can you say, I choose not to be, but you get paid to be with the media, right? So it's I don't think I'd want a microphone in my face after a game when I'm tired, I'm fatigued, maybe I made a bad decision. But you know what? It's, again, called being a human.
No, I think that's so important. In fact, we speak all the time about the characters and within the Torah, and that no character is perfect. The whole book of Genesis is based on flawed characters, and that's what actually makes them great. And when you see stories within professional sports as well, right? Overcoming the injury or even overcoming the mental, spiritual aspect as well. So there's another video that I found, which is called the push-up circle. I'm going to show this video, and I just love the strategies behind what you speak about that anybody can be part of. So we'll watch this for just one moment.
We start on the hole with the count. Once everybody's up with the hole, we're waiting on a couple of people here. My name is Arnie Kander. I'm the strength and conditioning coach for the Pistons, and we're talking today about our push-up routine, our push-up performance program. This is a way of bringing everybody together, literally in a circle. When you think about the strength of a circle, the bond of a circle, some guys are invited into the circle early on, young players, rookies, that's an automatic. The coach happened to join this time, that's a plus, that's icing on the cake. 2, 1.
So for me, it's an opportunity to sweat with them a little bit, plus to make sure that I don't get too far out of shape. So I've always done whatever they do conditioning-wise, I'll do it with them after shoot around.
1, 2.
Very different than going into a weight room where you're doing your own individual work. Once you step on the court, it's no longer an isolated I. It is a we. And so when we get in that circle, it's the ultimate we.
The ultimate we. We actually do that before Shabbat services. The rabbis in Canton, we get together, we do the push-up circle. But I'm thinking, how does that?
Mazel tov.
How does that? Yeah. Or I mean, we're gonna start that. But the team camaraderie, I love how you distinguish between the individual workouts versus the team, right? We've seen, physical therapy is an individual. My ankle hurts, help me. My shoulder hurts, help me. But it seems like you actually bring those team aspects together. How do you get the buy-in for everybody to say we're all part of this?
Yeah, so I think, again, it starts at the top. So if I were to go back to those days, Mr. Davidson, Bill Davidson, was such an example and a leader. He would come to the practice site. He built Guardian Industries headquarters right across from the practice site, which is right near the palace. Used to be. The palace is no longer. And Mr. Davidson has passed away. But he would come every day. And what's really interesting about Mr. Davidson, to bring him into the mix, he would call me every day. Now, this is the wealthiest man in Michigan. He's the owner of the Pistons. He's the owner of, you name it. He was the owner. And he would call and say, Arnie, what time is it okay for me to come over today? I'm like, Mr. Davidson, you come over anytime you want. The training room is yours. And so he would be next to Chauncey Billups. Ben Wallace was never on the treatment table, but he would walk through the room. And whoever was on a table, he would kibitz. He would start the conversation. He would pull everybody into his circle and ask them about what movies have you seen? What restaurants have you gone to? So it begins with the leader. In that video, that's a great video, Lawrence Frank, right, who now runs the LA Clippers, right? And I know this show is based out of LA. So Lawrence was the head coach. He joins in, and I think he actually did it every single time. So what we would do, and it's not in the video, is every person has a voice in that circle. It's not just a circle. So we would start with 2 push-ups, and the first person would count 2. Then we would hold in the push-up plank, the high push-up, and the next person would count 2. Then it would go to the next person. We would do 4 push-ups, but that person had to count out 4, and so on, all the way around the circle. So it invited voice to the circle. Now, if we just made it a push-up circle, I think we would have lost something. But by allowing every person to have a voice, everyone to really be involved in that circle. And what I loved, we would go 2 to 10 and then 10 to 2. So 2 to 10 is 30 push-ups and 30 seconds of push-up plank hold. When you go 10 to 2, you have now 60 push-ups and 60 seconds of plank hold. That's a lot. I love to hear their voices when they were tired, when they were fatigued, when their backs were dropping, when their hands were sliding. You saw me putting my hands on someone else's hands. That's coming together. That's us supporting. Hearing the other guys in the room saying, come on, you got it, come on. And me saying, louder, come on, I want to hear your voice. It's ways of bonding and connecting beyond the structure of, because it could become very methodical. Oh, it's a circle. Right. And no. Voices, connection, assistance, help. You know, I remember I speak at this camp called the Top 100 Camp. And these are the top 100 high school athletes. And I couldn't do it when I was in the NBA. So when I retired in 15, I think 60, whatever, I spoke there for 3 years in a row. And we would start off, and when we had finished the warm-up, we'd form a circle, a little different than a push-up circle, but just a circle. And I would take the mic off because I didn't want it to be in the gym. And I would say, hey, guys, what's the word of the day? What's the word of the week? And it was always family. And I'm like, whoa, stop. Does anybody know anybody here? Well, I know him. Okay. Are you a family? Are you committed to being a family? Because to me, your word, right, be impeccable with your word is very, very important. So if we're going to say 1, 2, 3 family, or 1, 2, 3 work, or 1, 2, 3 whatever, championship, let's be committed to that word. No different than that push-up circle. What's your word? What's the strength? What's the value? So amazing. For high school kids, it usually was 1, 2, 3 possibility. I'm like, wow, that is so different than 1, 2, 3 family. At the end of the week, it was 1, 2, 3 family. Like we worked to get those words family. We worked in that push-up circle with the head coach, Mr. Davidson, over, maybe watching, thumbs up as he walked by. Everybody in that circle deserved to be in that circle, work to be in that circle, work to support others. And to me, the buy-in's simple when you do that. If it's robotical, mechanical, kind of like, a lot of people do these team bonding things, and it doesn't feel real, you won't get the buy-in.
I love that. The word of the day, but also I'm in the business of words and live by that word. Preach and teach and live what you preach and teach. That's amazing to actually hear that happens. Like you said, right? We turn on the TV for a 7:00 game, TNT, and we just see who scores more points. But there's so many more aspects that go into those points and hoops in the basket as well.
Absolutely.
Mr. Davidson, you spoke about his relationships. I just want to speak a little about what you saw of the philanthropy off the court. I'm a recipient of his generosity through the Jewish Theological Seminary of America with the Davidson School of Education. So much what I do within the classroom and within the synagogue and the Jewish world is because of the tools that he was able to give me. The Davidson Center in Jerusalem, every single young boy and girl who has a bar and bat mitzvah in Jerusalem, I said, where did you have it? The Davidson Center. How did you see those two mixing during his career? Did he ever share those stories with his players about the philanthropy and the importance, not just of receiving, but I read an article just the other day that you were quoted, that he was the biggest giver that you ever saw. So what did that look like in real life, and how did that translate on the court as well?
Yes, so Mr. Davidson was never one to speak about what he was doing, which makes him more of a giver, right? He does it purely out of his heart. And this was everything from, I know exactly what you're saying, because some of those we would talk about because of our backgrounds both being Jewish. And so he would talk about what he was doing, for the rabbis. He was talking about what he was doing in Israel. We would have conversations about that. Really, what he was a sharer, right? He was, so for example, I'll give you a story. This is towards the end of his life. And he was in a hospital, and I went down to visit him,
And I walk in the room, and all he wanted to do was talk about my son, Ian. How's Ian doing? Tell me about Ian. You know, how's he doing? How's his schooling? You know, what's up for him in his life? Now, this was end of life. And at that point, he was still concerned about me and my family. Everybody he was around, you know, people were intimidated, right? This is the wealthiest man in Michigan, one of the wealthiest in the world, owner of sports teams, owner of a lot of things. He wanted to kibitz about a movie. He wanted to kibitz about a restaurant. If you knew a great restaurant, like we went to some of the probably places most people wouldn't go because he loved the banana split. And I remember I went, it was me and him and my son Ian, and I have a daughter, Lindsay, too, but it was my son Ian. And here we go to this kind of, you know, greasy spoon, whatever, but he loved it. It was a spot he liked. It was in near the basketball arena. We would go there. They knew when we were coming. I would say, get a table. And Mr. Davidson loved his dessert first, right? He liked to eat his sweets first. So we would get the banana split, and he only wanted one. And he wanted us all to share it. He wanted all of us to be part of that banana split. And my son, who I believe was probably 10, he's like, Dad, we have to share the banana split? I said, absolutely, we'll share this banana split. And so that was a great example of Mr. Davidson, number one, wanting us all to be together, wanting to support local communities, wanting to learn more about me and my son, the relationship, sharing, giving. I mean, so many things he gave nobody knows about. Being on that training table, there's no owner in sports that comes in. They might come and watch a practice. Maybe they go lift weights or they shoot some basketballs. How many get on a training table and talk to players and talk about life and learn more about these people? Like you hear so much, I call the NBA the Black and Decker world, right? A player's there, the next day they're gone. You take the 4 screws out, new nameplate. That wasn't Mr. Davidson. He wanted to know everybody. He wanted to know about their families. If you worked in the building, he one time, there was a game. He used to sit courtside near the end of the bench, and he would leave with about 3 or 4 minutes to go because there's a lot of traffic, and he wanted to kind of get out before the traffic. But he wouldn't leave. He would go to the other end of the court and stand in the hallway, and he'd watch the end of the game. And one day an usher came up and he said, "Sir, where are your seats at?" and he's like, "Oh, well, I sit down there." And they're like, "Sir, you don't have seats here. You have to leave the arena." He left the arena. And somebody came running down. They're like, "Oh no, that's Mr. Davidson. That's Mr. Do you understand? He's the owner of the team." He goes, "Wait. He's doing his job.
Wow.
He's doing his job. That's exactly what he's supposed to do." And I respect him for doing his job. And you know what? The game's over. I'm going to listen to it on the radio. Thank you for doing your work. I mean, typical, did he have an ego? Absolutely. He wouldn't have gotten to where he was. Was his ego in perspective? 100%. Again, where did you have dinner last night? What movie would you like to see? Oh, how's your family doing? That was the man. That was Bill Davidson.
So I have 2 last questions. The first is the premise of this show. Actually, we're going to ask that last. But the first actually is, you mentioned, physical strength and strength and conditioning not really being part of the game in terms of when the Pistons were doing their championship runs in the late 80s. It's really become part of the game. What do you see for the next phase of the NBA when we're sort of in this me now time, when it has to be about now, what I'm doing now, and people don't necessarily look in the future? If I'm not playing right now, if I'm hurt right now, see you later. What do you see for the future of the game in terms of the work that you're doing?
Well, things have changed. That's definitely, and I'm not saying for better or worse, things have changed. When you think about, if you look back at a championship picture, in that picture, you might have, including the full team, 1 or 2 scouts, maybe 3 coaches, 1 medical person, 1 strength coach. And I was one of the first in the league. You might have 25 people max. Now you might have 70 people.
Wow.
So when these families, you have 3 strength coaches in most teams, you have 3 or 4 massage therapists, you have a couple chiropractors, you've got a couple dentists, you've got 3 or 4 docs, you have probably 4 coaches, you have development coaches, you have movement people. I mean, the list goes on. So that being said, you would think, wow, that's a bounty to receive. The players' minds haven't changed. It's simplicity. I think if we overwhelm them with too many things, right? Too many things, got to do this, got to do that, got to do that. What's the gold standard? It's called basketball. It's playing a game. It's being ready to play. So I think you could take advantage of these very large groups, but make sure the message coming to a player is very simple and it's not too much stimulation. What do we talk about with the youth? Stimulation, computers, being on games, on their phones. Get off. We do all the sleep data and sleep studies. Get off the blue light at night. Get off your computer. But then we give them 25 people they deal with on a daily basis. So here we're telling them less stimulation. Here's some stimulation. Enjoy. So I think as we master, again, brilliant people in the business of sports, brilliant, as they master simplifying and reducing, understanding, the athletes really are the same. The brain's the same. It's what we create and the challenges of that.
So first of all, a shout out to Stephen Freeman, an old friend of mine and my family, and of course a good friend of you. So Stephen, if you're watching, just a thank you very much for this amazing, amazing connection. And the last question, which is the premise of this show, it's not a normal sports talk radio show. I'm a rabbi who happens to have a passion for sports. Is there faith in the world of sports?
Oh my gosh, where would we be without it? Where would we be? I mean, at the end of the day, everything again is about, as we said, routine. Faith is routine, right?
Yes.
If you wake up with no faith, if you leave that night and go into your dreams with no faith, good luck. I mean, it is all about, and faith is, as you know, Rabbi, you teach, is the unknown and known. A lot of this, you can talk about God. You can talk about, discipline in life. You can talk about respect. You can talk about going to the synagogue. You can talk about family. You can talk about charity. At the end of the day, a lot of what we do is not visible. It's not visible. That's when we challenge ourselves. What do we do when it's not visible? The question you asked me about Mr. Davidson, yeah, a lot of it's visible, but a lot with Mr. Davidson was not visible. It's things he did that never reached the media, right? That's really faith. What do we do when nobody gets a chance to really know about it, but we know about it? It's important for us. So what you teach is really coaching. You're a coach at the highest level, at the highest
I always
level.
wanted it. Thank you, Arnie. Actually, there's
and a shout out to,
there's something that we read on.
Go ahead, Rabbi. Go ahead. I was
On the
gonna say,
holidays,
Mhm.
we read that the things that are revealed to us, those are for us. But the things that are not revealed, the secrets, those are for God. And it's exactly what you said of the known and unknown. I love that statement and how it's seen outside of the synagogue. I have a basketball camp going on, Sinai Temple basketball camp right now. There's 50 kids upstairs. And the reason why we do it in the synagogue is because the faith aspect, they don't have to check their kippah when they leave the door. They can actually do this at a high level within a faith environment that brings people together, that creates the push-up circle, and they don't have to be two separate individuals. They can actually do it together. So yeah, I'll let you close on that.
Can you send them one message for me?
Please.
When you have them on the court and they bend their ankles, right? Like shooting a free throw or shooting a jump shot or stopping, that's davening, right? That's davening. It's your ability to hold, to pause, to be present, because you have to do something after this daven, right? At the bima, we know what you do. You have to come up. We know what the purpose is. In basketball, it's the point of choice. So as we lower our center of gravity, what do we do next? It might be a free throw. It might be a change of direction. It might be a pass. So again, the gifts and the discipline that you are teaching, highest level of coaching. So yeah, congrats on that, Rabbi.
Well, you just saved the best for last. Based on that statement, there is much more for us to discuss. I hope that when you're in LA, you'll be able to both visit our camp and our shul and synagogue community here at Sinai Temple. A big shout out and thank you to Arnie Kander, longtime championship physical therapist and strength and conditioning coach of the Detroit Pistons, the Minnesota Timberwolves, now beginning, but hopefully one day Olympic climber. Arnie, it's so great to have you here at Rabbi on the Sidelines. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rabbi, for having me. Have a beautiful day.